Jim, thanks, and thank you all for being here. You know, Jim is being billed as the guy who is going to be the most popular person in education in about a week, because he's not quite there yet. He's about to start helping a nice young couple in California spend their money on education. But before that, I want to wind you back to the job that you've been doing up until this moment. And really, I'd like you to connect it to something in your own personal experience. You're a guy who started out in the D.C., could have started out in the D.C. public school system, but you're a person who, through your own experience, learned about the possibilities of education.
Yeah, so, well, one, thanks for being here, and thanks for taking the time to ask me some questions before I even have my new job. So I grew up here in D.C. I had the opportunity, for a whole variety of reasons, a lot of sacrifice on my parents' part, to go to schools different than the ones in my neighborhood. And what I saw was the divergence in the path between myself and a lot of my friends because of that educational opportunity. And I knew I was not the smartest kid in my neighborhood. I wasn't the smartest kid among my friends. But I knew that opportunity was life-changing. So it made me want to be in education, and made me start to ask, why did that other kind of educational experience not work for my friends? So fast forward through lots of different experiences in business and trying to do different things in education and even philanthropy. I was just left last year in January, the U.S. Department of Education as a deputy secretary, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. I knew I wanted to do something that was flexible, that moved at speed, that was innovative, and that started to crack the code on how we leverage technology and other tools to provide the kind of education that we all want for every young person in the country. And I wound up coming across a company I didn't actually even expect to run across because it was in the post-secondary space. It's called 2U, where I'm actually literally the number 2 and the letter U, that partners with top colleges to take their graduate programs online and do so in a way that top-ranked colleges are proud of, and that students get a really well-rounded experience. And it was really interesting to me because their tagline was "No back row," right? And you think about, well, how can an online company talk about something like that? But literally, when you listen to the students talk about the experience, almost always, at least one of the students, if there was a panel, would say something about it being intimate. Mm-hmm. And so you think, wow, an online experience that is intimate, where
because it's 2U, because it's 1-to-1, right?
Well, actually, it's not 1-to-1, but you work independently first. You then go in with your classmates, which is usually like 12-to-1 with a faculty member on average. Now, think about that. And what experience did you have in your undergraduate, and probably even if you did graduate experience, where you had that kind of intensive interaction while you were with your faculty member throughout the entire college experience?
So that really does bring you to what we're talking about in your next job. This guy, I don't know, he doesn't stay in jobs very long right now.
That one was a surprise, I must say.
Just about a year after he started at 2U, he was recruited by, as I mentioned, a nice young couple in California, Dr. Priscilla Chan and Mr. Mark Zuckerberg, who have expressed their interest in improving education, improving educational outcomes for young people across the country. And now you are going to lead, in about a week, I guess?
June 1st.
June 1st, you're going to lead the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. And one of the foundations of this is that personalized learning that you were just talking about.
Yeah, Mark and Priscilla are very clear that they want to deliver the kind of education we want for our own children to every single child in the world, to help them realize their full potential. They recognize there's 2 pieces to that. One is that, in general, every child needs a personalized education, one that meets them where they are, that understands their needs, that taps into their interests, and allows them to be taken from wherever they are to the maximum, as far as they can possibly go. They also recognize that, in particular, adversity impacts kids that live in underserved communities in a specific way that gets in the way of learning. And so they want to take those 2 things, recognize that they're actually one, like personalization recognizes your needs, and figure out how we do something we've never done before in the world, which is provide a fantastic education to everyone in the world who wants to get one.
This seems like a great goal,
Sure.
But let's put it in practical terms, what does that really mean? Are you going to start buying every kid in America a tutor? What happens here?
No, I mean, so one of the things that's really exciting to me is both that this is a bold and audacious goal, but also that you see examples of things happening today. So let me start with a very simple premise, which is that there's a lot of research already that basically says if we could give every kid a one-to-one tutor, then they would do what's called 2 standard deviations better than in class, in a regular classroom. So that means your 50th percentile kid is basically at the 98th percentile. Now, that seems unrealistic because like, who can pay for that? But then you say, well, in almost every sector, we have had that question, this luxury good that was completely out of reach of everyone, that somehow we figured out how to get it to a point where we could actually deliver it so that anyone can have one, so that anyone can have a car, so that anyone can have indoor plumbing, so anyone can have electricity. That's what we have to do here. Now, what that means is there are schools that are doing work in this area today. One of the things that Mark and Priscilla funded early on is a great school network called Summit Public Charter Schools. And Summit has created a model that's focused on the secondary level, that lets the kid take ownership of their own education, that lets the teacher get the kind of resources and tools they need to facilitate that process. And so while each kid is working on pursuing the things that they're really interested in and building on their strengths and supporting their weaknesses, they also are a part of a collective that's doing the same thing. And that is producing outsized results relative to other schools around them. But there are also folks that are doing great work in after school and tutoring. I talk often about some work I saw DARPA do with the Navy, where they were able to create a digital tutor that allowed, your standard class of folks who enter the military, some with not great educational academic histories behind them. And they would, after 16 to 18 weeks, they would outperform folks who had 5 to 7 years of IT work in the field. And so there are real breakthroughs to build from, and what we need to do is figure out how we channel them to do it for every single child.
So does that mean that you're going to be in the business at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative of creating more charter schools? Does it mean that you're going to do grants to different organizations? Because I'm sure that there are probably folks in here are looking at you like, hey, can I get his email? Because I forget. I mean, what is it? What is it really?
What's it really going to do? So I think we're going to do some of the above. One, there's a lot we still need to understand, so we're going to invest in research and development. You can see the kind of things that Mark and Priscilla and the team at Startup Education have funded already. Folks like Todd Rose up at Harvard that have focused on the end of average and how you actually tailor all kinds of experiences to the unique needs and individualized needs we all have, and how that helps to realize potential. You can see us going to do things investing in people trying to do new ideas and scale the kind of schools like Summit, but there are other folks that are starting schools that are trying to take this personalized approach and need other kinds of, and using different tools and resources to get to the same place. How do we actually meet the needs of every child? You'll see us actually investing in companies that are building tools and resources for scaling models. So like there's an organization called Alt Schools that is trying to build an operating system to help people who want to start very small personalized schools be able to do that and be able to afford to do it even when they're working at a very small scale. So you'll see us working in each one of these different areas. One of the things I've learned over the years trying to do innovation work is oftentimes we get fixated on how do we scale this one program or how do we scale this one organization. And after a long time, what I realized is that what we're really trying to do is scale outcomes. We want to scale these fantastic outcomes for every single child, and the organizational form is not the big deal. The big deal is what is going to allow you to get the result that you need and get it to scale for as many people as possible.
There are like 1,000 questions going through my head, but some of them have to do with equity.
Sure.
And opportunity.
Sure.
And that's what we're talking about here. You can scale, but also bear in mind, if you're not in the place where this stuff is happening, look, we happen to be in Washington, D.C., where there are probably better alternatives, certainly for elementary and upper education for anyone who can afford it, who has the resources to it. How are you going to make sure that you're reaching?
Yeah. So I think that there are two parts to it. One is, the good news is that it is an explicit focus, right? It is one thing to figure out, myself included, parents who have resources figure out how to get their kids what they need, wherever they happen to be. The question is, how do we make it possible for everyone else? The second thing is, Mark and Priscilla have been very clear that this is about getting it to everyone, regardless of where their zip code is. You look at Priscilla's background, she talks a lot about the experience of kind of finding her way, falling into Harvard,
Her parents did not have the opportunity, the educational, they were immigrants and did not have the educational opportunity.
Correct. So
and she nearly did not either.
And she nearly did not either. And so it is both personal as well as they see as a moral and ethical obligation and responsibility. But the other part is that one of the things that they bring to this is they're both very analytical. She's a scientist, and he loves technology. And what we've learned to do over time is figure out how you do these fantastic things at a cost that lets lots and lots of people access it. How do you actually spread the kind of education we're talking about it to millions and millions, if not billions of people? And that sounds like a crazy thing to try and aspire to, but it's frankly what we believe we need to do as a society, both to realize the potential of each individual, but also to realize the potential of the human collective.
There is not a lot of question that the Zuckerbergs have resources of significant, and they have promised to push forward with their own personal funding to support these kinds of initiatives, particularly in education at this point. But of course, you know about the Newark Initiative, and I'm sure much of our audience does as well, where Mark Zuckerberg put $100 million into Newark schools, and there's some debate about the effectiveness of that. He has said that this initiative is really a 2.0 version. What have you learned from that? Yeah. What has he talked about?
I mean, it was really great to talk to them as I was beginning to think about taking on this role and their experience in Newark, because it was clear that they had, two things were really important to me. One was that they had learned from the experience and that they had recognized that it was a risk that they had taken. They knew everything wasn't going to work, but that there were things that they could have done to mitigate some of the pushback that came with the reforms that came in. And
some of that came from unions?
Some of that came from unions and community members who, I mean, I think you never hear, I think, Mark and Priscilla talk now without talking explicitly about the commitment they feel. And it's not just, they actually feel it. It's not just because of Newark, but they definitely emphasize it more now, to listen to the communities that they're going to serve and make sure that that voice is a part of the work and that they're engaged in the work in an authentic way. So that is a definite lesson learned. And what was already there, and I think as a value, is a level of humility about the work that is centering. But I think they recognize they need to put that at the forefront of how they enter the work as well. But the second thing is, which is also important to me, is a lot of people are brave until they get punched in the nose for the first time. and the big question is not, because you are going to, if you do try and do bold things, you are going to struggle and you are going to actually fail. And the question is, can you get up, can you learn, can you dust yourself off, and can you try again? And what it was really inspiring to me was, it was clear to me that though this was clearly a difficult situation, that they clearly had taken some criticism for it, they were committed to continuing to move forward, continuing to learn, and continuing to do better. And frankly, if we're going to create bold solutions, that's what we need.
Okay. Well, we'll see how well you do at that, and we'll see the questions that are from the audience. I know we have a limited amount of time, but I'm sure people want to know what you're doing there.
Hi, Jim. In the education sector, we are fond of getting fixated on false choices.
Sure.
District and charter,
Yep.
Union, non-union, public, private, for-profit, non-profit. As we move very rapidly into a personalization era of education, and it's a word, personalization is a word we also heard from Neil, who represented a libertarian point of view earlier on the Common Core panel, and we heard also democratization as a goal of education from a civil rights leader, Dr. McGuire, earlier. How do we ensure we don't get into another false choice between personalization and a need for a civil society where everyone can understand and interact with each other? And how do you think about that as you're funded by the success of a platform that has connected people in amazing ways around the world, but has, if you want to only be connected to the people who believe the things that you do, it's quite easy to do that as well.
Okay.
So I think that you point out one of the things that I am extraordinarily focused on, which is not getting caught up in the false choices. And one of the things that was exciting to me is the embrace that Mark and Priscilla have of the necessary complexity of this work. That it is actually, poverty does matter. Maslow's need still holds. If you are hungry, it is hard to focus. If your teeth hurt, it is hard to learn. If you can't see the board, if you can't see the computer screen, it is hard to do the things you need to do to excel. They recognize that that combined with a powerful instructional model is not a separate thing. It is actually one and the same in terms of providing a great educational opportunity. I think the other thing that is recognized is that it is through educational opportunity that we give everyone the opportunity to be them full selves, to participate fully in the communities in which they operate. Whether or not, regardless of what perspective you come from, being able to be thoughtful and engaged and productive is what allows you to be a citizen. And I think what we're seeing, both domestically and abroad, is our failure to do that for many segments of society is contributing to the things that are pulling us apart. So we haven't had a really deep discussion about the role of education in democracy and how this is ultimately going to lead to a theory of change that changes the world. But I think the fundamental belief that by allowing the individuals in large number to realize their full potential, that the world is just going to get better.
Well, we're going to put you to work, and we're going to ask you to come back the next time we have an education summit to talk about where you brought this to. Jim Shelton's got a lot of big questions to answer at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.